Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part 2 of my conversation with Celeste Kong, professor and the Chair of General Dentistry at the Boston University Henry M. Goldman School of Dental Medicine. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I think it's brilliant. And I also think that what it does is that this shines a little light into, everything that you had talked about from the case, learning from cases and what you had just said, shines a light to sort of what the medical education, looks like today, and how important it is for students to gain some of these skills, but in a way that, to me, it's, these observation skills is not only going to be good for dentistry, it's going to be good for everything that they do. It's going to be good for the families. It's going to be good for the activism that they might do outside. Is going to be good for the advocacy that they do, in the community and so on and so forth.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. And so that's one of my more recent projects, I guess you could say. I just nudge them a little bit, like, it would be nice if you do this. Then you'd have to give them some points for it because, of course, students don't like to do stuff unless you give them points for it. But some people are very creative with what they post and in terms of how they, put it out, in terms of how they outlay.
And do they share with each other, between the students?
Yes, they can share between each other. Now, we ask them not to share outside of BU, so the students don't do that, but they share with their classmates.
No, but it's such an important thing. I mean, that's really, and I don't know if you knew this, Celeste, that's one of the premise of one of the big pieces that we wanted from Digication when we started building it over 20 years ago. It was about, the fact that we wanted students to have a way to learn from each other. And I think that when you just say that, it feels very, it feels very sort of generic. Sure, you learn from each other. But how? What do you mean by that? And I think what you said really sort of echoes what we were doing, which is the idea that, I was teaching in art and design programs, so, of architects or digital media people, etc. But again, like you said, there is not a right answer. We don't have such a thing. We don't have the ability to have a multiple choice if we wanted to, right?
That's a good thing.
It's a great thing. So when we give a prompt to a student, and set up some kind of premise that says this is what you're going to be building, they can interpret it in any ways they want. And like you said, all of the background, the where they're from, all of that will bring in something really different. And there's nothing, there's no way to be wrong about it, but you have to be authentic about it and go deep.
Right.
And we love the idea when we say people learn from each other is when they were given the same thing and you wreck your brain and you think that this is how it should be, right? Even though there's no right or wrong answer, you are trying to find out what it is that you think this means, right? So you figure that out. And as you figured it out, you realize that there are 15 other people figuring out their own ways out. And when they present it to each other, when you see their work, you realize that they are also right. And then you then suddenly, because you spend so much time wrecking your brain to try to figure this out, you now suddenly have a really deep appreciation of those other 14 ways of doing things. And then you start to sort of get really humbled and you start to get really sort of, you thought you had an open mind before. Now you have an even more open mind because you thought, well, yeah, if it's not this, it might be that. But you couldn't think of 15 other ways of looking at it, including those ways that you thought definitely wouldn't work, but they made it work.
Yeah, I think also when I asked my colleague who teaches treatment planning to ask our students to reflect upon the process of treatment planning, to reflect upon what they learned in class in terms of treatment planning and sequencing a treatment plan, because that's the more difficult nuance, how to sequence how to prioritize treatment. And it's not an always easy course. There's a lot of stuff you need to do. But when you ask a student, what do you think you learned? Or what do you think helped you the most? They never say it was all for naught. They will always say, this is how I learned best. And this was wonderful. And, they may not have necessarily liked the process, but they liked where they got to.
They discover a little bit more about themselves as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so when they reflect upon that, it's usually very positive. And I think it makes them also think about things differently when they reflect upon how they feel about their learning and their competence.
Now, Celeste, I don't want to put you on the spot here, and so feel free to not answer this. Is this just, you and your program, or is this like how all the other medical schools and dental schools think?
I think I got some of this from our School of Public Health. And the people from the School of Public Health who have been using it, and they had their graduates, their masters, masters of public health people posting things about what they learned when they went on these mission trips and what they did while they were there. And I thought, oh, our students can do that.
Yeah.
But we don't, and that's what I wanted them to do. So, our students who do service learning, for example, these are DMD1 students. They're first year in dental school, but we send them to elementary schools to teach students how to take care of their teeth and teach them how to brush their teeth and teach them perhaps they might even do small procedures like sealants to prevent cavities.
Yeah.
And they were required to write a lesson plan. How are you going to deliver this material to these little children? And we want you to record this lecture that you're going to give to these little kids. And I'm like, and what do we do with those recordings? Now, that was the hard part because early on, Jeff, it wasn't easy to post videos.
Right. Yeah. Well, going back quite a few years now. And
a long time.
Yep.
And we struggled. We really struggled. But because we had the content, we just didn't have anywhere to put it, Some students were posting it on YouTube and we're going, not sure you can post that on YouTube.
Yeah.
And granted, they never took videos of the kids that they were actually lecturing to because that's a no-no. They were only doing videos of themselves doing the presentations. But I said, we have all of this wonderful content. And if they could put it all together to show how they've developed as a first year student and how they then did other kinds of case presentations when they were their fourth year selves, they could not only see their own development, but they could show other people how well that they did over these years. So I think that when you have all of this stuff, and a lot of dental schools are doing all of these things, but are they giving the students the tools to put them all together in one place so that they can take it to their program directors or to a future employer to show them all the wonderful things that they've done? And I think, that's how I actually sold it to one other faculty member who is in the second year preclinical course for fixed prosthodontics. Our students not only learn how to prep and provisionalize the simulators, but They are using digital devices now to look and evaluate their work.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to ask them how they felt about these digital tools, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And I think maybe one of the other screenshots I sent you might have had something to do with that. When the students reflect upon how they progressed from the first teeth that they prepped in the simulator to when they had to take their final exams, because they obviously had to develop their dexterity skills, their psychomotor skills, and learn how to manipulate the materials that they were going to be using, as well as the tools that they were using. So when students are reflecting upon their progress on those things, I think it's very positive.
Yeah, I could see that, and I also think that, I mean, going back again one more time to the idea that when they're reflecting on these things, it really is not just the content of that reflection that is, it's cool to be able to see that, but I think it activates your brain in some different ways. It activates your brain into sort of this mode of being able to um, look at something from perspectives that you didn't have from before, or make connections between things that you didn't make before. And I must say that I don't know whether this is part of our societal and cultural shifts in recent years, in addition to the type of teaching and learning that you all are doing in school, thinking about these reflections and having students think deeply about connections, between their own experiences and so on.
Right.
That I'm also seeing students having a much, I don't know, I can't help but to think that today's students have a greater sense of purpose than when I was in school. Maybe just personally, but I looked around with my classmates, and we all just want to get a job. We didn't care
Of
what job.
course, I think everyone still wants to get a job,
Yeah.
but having been responsible for making sure that our students reach certain competencies, um, and you're supposed to look at multiple measures of assessment. It can't be just one way that you determine whether a person became competent. What were the multiple measures of assessments? What were the different tools that you used? And students are also supposed to become lifelong learners and learn how to self-evaluate. So yes, I can give them a grade sheet and say, okay, grade yourself. But if you ask them to reflect upon exactly how they got there, that's a different thing than asking them to give themselves a grade.
Right.
Because certainly, even though you might give them a rubric that says, give yourself an A if you did this, give yourself a B if you did that, they don't have to think too much about what happens then. They go, okay, I did this, so I can give myself an A, or I didn't do this, I have to give myself a B. But if they actually have to think about, well, why didn't I do that? Or why couldn't I? Or I could have done this, but I didn't. That's a whole different way of thinking about self-assessment.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that's also another important way to look at these reflections, because I remember you used to say you like to let the student or the learner just go with it, and I'm like, the problem with that is that they need, I think, a little bit more direction in terms of how to think about what their issues are. So we tend to give them a heads up about what are the kinds of things we're looking for in terms of self-assessment, in terms of critical thinking, in terms of communication, because they're going to be evaluated on those skill sets. And so, if they didn't, I think they get extra points also for what kinds of photographs and the quality of the photographs that they might post. to evaluate their work. But I think, giving them some direction, because so many of our students, as I said earlier, don't do a lot of real writing. It's not as though that's a strong suit in a lot of colleges. In a lot of colleges, I always call it multiple guess for your exams. Multiple guess. And if it's true false, then you get a 50-50 chance on your
right.
But if you actually have to write, it's a much different skill. And I will say, I know that my faculty members, my colleagues, will realize that for the people who are not native English speakers and writers, they have to give them a little bit more leeway, because that is a very different kind of skill set too. Content rather than grammar.
Right.
Maybe,
They can look at the ideas and the concepts behind what the writing. I mean, you can oftentimes you can have grammatical mistakes, but you do get the idea, behind it.
Correct. Yeah.
I think that there is a great sense of sort of hearing from what you are saying just now. There's this sense of, maybe this is what the future of sort of education and assessment in medicine could be really a lot different than what it is today.
Yes, I definitely think so. I think that for someone to put all the pieces together, it does require a different skill set. And asking them, I mean, some institutions, for example, or some programs rely heavily on oral examinations. I mean, a lot of not licensure, but for example, a lot of the specialty board examinations are oral exams. You sit in front of a cadre of examiners who will listen and question you, and it's an oral exam because they want to know how well you can put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't want to read it, but they can certainly listen to you.
Yeah, sure.
So I think our pre-docs do actually a really wonderful job when you ask them to do it. But it is obviously something that a faculty member now has to create a rubric for, and therefore assess it differently,
Well, teaching is a lot of work, isn't it?
Well, it's a lot of work when you know what you're supposed to be doing.
So if you just do multiple guesses, it's okay. That's easy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, writing a good multiple guess exam is also not so easy.
Yeah.
But I think it's a different skill set.
Yeah.
I remember going from that British education to the American education. I thought, wow, I won't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I always find, and by the way, I don't know if you knew this, but I also had a British education myself. And
where?
So in England. I used to live in Hong Kong when I was young, and then as a teenager, I spent my high school in England, and also there's not a lot of multiple choice.
Yes, definitely not.
Yeah,
I had to take my O levels, and O levels were always an essay, right?
Yep.
Yes,
and I must say that when I first saw this multiple choice thing in the U.S., also I went to college in the U.S., and I didn't have too many, but we've done them. And the way that I was thinking about, because I was in an art and design school, right? When I saw that, I thought, I kept thinking, this is just like the 8-bit, color, this is like Pong. Like you only have 2 colors, and that's what you got, and that's the that's the fidelity of understanding of something, and
Yeah.
and I'm kind of going like, how could this possibly work? It also takes away the full color that we actually see and experience. It feels a little bit,
So now I
yeah.
understand how come you come to create something like Digication. So, most of my elementary and high school were from Hong Kong and Singapore.
Oh, okay.
And so certainly a British system of education. And they did well by me. I did well, but it's a very different environment. And there are always pros and cons to everything, right? One of the things I will say that is a con for the Singapore version was that at the age of 15, I think it was at the age of 15, they streamed us. What that means is they've decided what our strengths were at the age of 15, and they started choosing our subjects for us.
So you had to do arts or science. And I remember having to pick that too. You are in the arts or in the sciences, and basically the brighter kids all go to the sciences. They make more money, and the people in the arts didn't. That's what it was like for us.
Yeah. Yeah. But you see, where in Singapore, you didn't have the choice. They didn't give you the
Oh,
choice.
so you if you score. We had this similar thing too. Like you get to you can only go to choose if you score high enough.
Correct.
Right. So
Correct.
you had a choice, but you have to
Yes.
score. You have to
Correct.
perform.
Correct.
Right.
If you didn't perform really well, then you had no choice.
Yeah.
They were
Then
going
your
to
choice
stream you
is that
out.
one choice.
Right.
Right.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Correct. If you scored well, then if you wanted to do arts, then you could if you wanted to, but otherwise they were going to put you in the sciences.
Yeah.
And it's not as though. So I personally, I wanted to do architecture. I don't know if I'd ever told you
Oh,
that.
really?
My first semester in college was in architecture, but because I loved the math and I loved the drafting and the drawing and the art piece, in the end, I went in more into the sciences after the first semester. So I think it's just a different kind of skill set, and depending on how people feel about what it is they want to spend their life work doing. I think that's the real choice. I think, unfortunately, at least in Singapore, where I had friends who did science, but not enough science, so that in Singapore, well, that means you can't do this, and I think that's at the age of 15, 16, and 17, that's really too early.
Yeah, it's early.
It's really, really too early. So that's why I say it's a con. It's not a pro.
Right. If you're a late bloomer, you are kind of,
yes, because there are,
your
and
opportunity,
especially
you don't have to have the opportunity to bloom.
exactly.
Right?
And the thing is that doesn't take into account that, for example, boys, and I have one son, boys tend to bloom a little bit later.
Yeah.
So, and that if everybody has to have a decision made at the age of 15, I don't think that's any good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I do think that, there's, these things, I feel like, you're right in the pros and cons, and the pendulums also swing back and forth too. Like we were saying before, people used to have no choice but to do things more hands-on. Now we have more choices, but then, like at some point we sort of forgot about the hands-on stuff, and then we kind of starting to come back a little bit more, and people started to, miss that and see the value. But then when you combine them, maybe you see, I do think that generally the needle is moving forward, or the graph is going up.
Yeah. I really think that what we have at BU in terms of this technology, that is absolutely the way going forward. More and more people will be scanning an impression. More and more people might be dealing with ceramics and cone beam data. I really, really do believe that. But there are many parts of the world and even in this country where people can't afford access to those kinds of technology.
Yeah.
And, the community health centers at this point in time can't afford that technology. And therefore, people who will want to give care to the indigent and people who will want to work at community health centers to give back to their communities, they have to learn how to do it the old fashioned way,
Right.
you
Right.
know? And that's why I think it's important that our students learn both. At the beginning, I used to say, well, I'm going to have to push them to use the new technology because, they might be fearful of the computers. You know what? That wasn't the problem. Nowadays, I have to require them to use the old technology a little bit
Right.
so that they know how to use it when they leave us.
Yeah.
It's a different thing.
Now, so again, congratulations on your
Thank
retirement,
you.
which is coming up in days.
Yes, days.
What's next for you?
Well, I am currently the regent of the International College, the deputy regent, I will say, deputy regent of the International College of Dentists in Massachusetts. So I'll still have my hands in dentistry for a little bit, at least organized dentistry. My son is getting married next month, so he's out in California. I'm going to go out to a vineyard where he wants to have his wedding.
Nice.
That'll be fun. And, my husband has been totally retired for the last 3 years, and he's just been waiting for me. And I hope we can travel again. He said this was the last New England winter we were going to put up with. Yeah, we had a little bit more snow this past winter,
Yeah.
but I'm all for it. I think, I think that it will be a different thing for sure. And it's definitely bittersweet when I've been at this one institution for 40 years. Um, and I've loved it. And there were times when it was difficult and there were times when it was just a lot of fun. But all in all, it's been a wonderful career for me here. And Boston University, I believe, has been an excellent place. I truly do believe that they've taken care of their faculty members through this COVID too. So I think I'm just very thankful for all the opportunities. I called, actually, I'll tell you this one story. I have worked for 5 chairs at this university, but I recently called the first chair I ever worked for. He's 92 years old now, and he says, I've lost a lot of muscle mass, Celeste, except for between my ears. So and I said, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity for this career. And he said, well, he chose me because he said it was known that I like to help my colleagues. And he thought that that was a good thing for a teacher to be. And I said, okay, if my epitaph is that I like to help my colleagues, then I think that's a good thing.
That is wonderful. What a way to have that cap off at the end here. I please, thank you so much for sharing this incredible journey, and also on your end giving us the opportunity to work with this incredible program. And we are so honored to be part of it, and just seeing how you have sort of transformed the way that this program over the last years is inspiring, and give us also hope that
Yeah.
like we were saying, this could be the future of what education in medicine looks like, and that's amazing.
I think I told you this in an email, but last year we made a poster because we've done a survey, and it's going to be an ongoing 3-year survey of how the students feel about ePortfolio in terms of their learning, things like critical thinking and communication skills. And we only had 1 year of data last year that they put into a poster for our local education day here on the medical campus. And the faculty members won best faculty poster for it.
Oh, that's very
So
nice.
it was very nice. And I can see all the emails going out to the students right now about please respond to this survey so that we can assess what we're doing with you in terms of your ePortfolios. So I think it's all good.
Well, even though you'll be retiring soon, I'm sure that your legacy will live on for a long time, and I hope that I get to work with your successors and your colleagues moving forward. But I'm sure that we'll see you on the trail somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you again, Celeste, for everything and for sharing all the insights and knowledge. What a wonderful, wonderful way to for me to have the luck to catch you, a week
Just
before
before I leave Boston University.
Yeah, and I hope that BU will take this into their archive because that's probably a lot of information that they wouldn't know otherwise. not in one place anyway.
Well, I want to thank you for designing something like this, Jeff, because otherwise I was trying to figure out how students were going to put this all in one place to show the development, because what you want to see is that development, how they progressed. And just seeing one or two pieces doesn't really put that together.
Right. Well, thanks again, Celeste, and we will see you soon, I'm sure.
Hope so. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care. This concludes our conversation. To hear our next episode, be sure to subscribe to Digication Scholars Conversations on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. The Digication Scholars Conversations series is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative ePortfolio programs in K-12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for tuning in.